Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Monday, January 18th. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day out there to everybody. I know I still have to go to work here on Monday, but there's a few industries and a few jobs out there. And if you're fortunate enough to be in one of those and have Monday off, hopefully you're enjoying yourself and checking out the podcast to catch up on all the latest Major League Baseball news and signings that have taken place. We got a great show for you here today. Like I mentioned, there were a handful of moves happening over the weekend, as well as a ton of rumors and notes to get through here today. So thanks again for tuning in. Let's jump right into it. But the New York Yankees, they have officially made their presence known here this offseason. They have joined the fun, joined the hot stove, or whatever else you want to reference it as. But a couple of moves made by the Yankees that we'll get into here today and kind of what this means for the rest of their offseason and their plans to attack 2021. But right off the top here, of course, you guys heard the latest. DJ LeMahieu, one of the top free agents available on the market, has re-signed with the Yankees. Now, this has not yet become official, but reports out there are stating that it is a 6-year, $90 million deal for DJ. And this is certainly an interesting signing for the Yankees over the course of 6 years, because he was coming off a 2-year, $24 million deal with the Yankees that paid him $12 million a year. And with this 6-year deal at $90 million, this brings the average annual value of the contract to $15 million a year. And this is a bit fascinating when it comes to the bigger picture for the Yankees and what they're trying to accomplish, because on the surface, you're looking at a guy coming off his age 33 season. People were predicting a 4-year deal. That seemed to be where the market was, but the Yankees took a play out of the Phillies playbook and essentially extended the years, kept the money relatively the same, which spreads out the average annual value, or the AAV, that we'll reference here moving forward. But for LeMahieu, only to get a raise of about $3 million a year certainly seems to be a win from the Yankees' perspective. And if you're looking at it from LeMahieu's perspective, the player's side of things, a guy who's 33 years old, this contract is going to take him through his age 39 season. This gives him stability and shows him that, hey, you're going to have a job for those age 38, 39 seasons at still about $15 million a year. So he'll continue to get his service time. He'll accrue that as you go. And honestly, that matters a little bit when you get into retirement and pensions and things like that, you know, really don't make for great podcast radio here, but are certainly something that you look at when you're on the player side of things. To get to certain levels, it leads to, you know, things beyond the playing days. So a 6-year pact for LeMahieu, I'm sure he was excited to get that. And looking down the future, like I said, if you're looking at 2025, 26, for this guy to still be getting $15 million a year is certainly something that they are going to enjoy moving forward from a player side of things. But LeMahieu, of course, everybody knows kind of the background, the statistics on him. DJ led the league in hitting in the American League last year for the Yankees. He had previously done so in the National League, one of only a handful of guys to lead the league in average, both in the American League and the National League. And one thing I did find fascinating as I was diving in a bit more into some details about DJ is that over the course of the last 5 years, there have only been 2 defensive shifts against LeMahieu. And for those of you out there who do not like the shift defensively, think it's hurting the game of baseball, I myself, I was always raised, and I was one of those hitters through college, hitting 350 at the Division I level, but I sprayed the ball all over the yard. You went from foul pole to foul pole, and that's how you became a successful hitter. You didn't become one-dimensional. I wasn't worried about launch angles or spin rates. It was more hit the ball where it's pitched. And DJ is certainly one of these old school type of players that follows this formula. I mean, he can take you all the way down the right field line to the left field seats. And because of this defensively, you have to play him straight up. So for those of you out there who have a player on your team or somebody currently in the lineup that has trouble defeating the shift, always seems to hit into the shifts, here in Philadelphia, it was Ryan Howard for the longest time. I mean, he was on the ground to the right side and in the air more so to the left side. But because of this, he was always hitting into that shift where the second baseman was playing shallow right field, which took away that single in between the first and second baseman. Well, you can't do this against DJ. He'll burn you. If you guys go over there, he's got nothing against hitting a ground ball to the second base hole, getting on base and taking his 2 for 4 and going home that evening. So to see a guy have the success that he has to the average level of leading the league in hitting, be able to use the entire field, I think this is a perfect guy to try to emulate. If you're an up-and-coming player or you're in the minor leagues, this just goes to show that you need to use the field in its entirety, and you can certainly have more success than hitting 220 with 50 home runs. You get the likes of Crash Davis down in Baltimore, or Schwarber and Rizzo. The Cubs popped to mind the last handful of years. But if you can use the entire field, you can certainly continue to find success, because 2 shifts in 5 years for baseball here in 2020 is absolutely fascinating, because there's guys that get 3 at-bats in a game, have 3 defensive shifts against them, and they've already had more than LeMahieu over the course of the last 5 years. But from the Yankees' perspective, I like this deal. The tea leaves had always read that he would be heading back to New York. He was kind of playing the market. There were some interested teams, but it certainly seemed destined that he and the Yankees were going to come back together and find themselves in agreement. But this wasn't the only move that the Yankees made over the last handful of days. Like I said, they've certainly been busy with their roster. They did make an addition as well of Corey Kluber. We spoke on the last podcast how Kluber was throwing for upwards of 20, 25 teams to show that he was healthy, throwing a bullpen on the side, and the Yankees certainly saw enough to find themselves interested to where they signed Kluber to a 1-year, $11 million deal. And this is a bit of a low-risk, high-reward signing for the likes of the Yankees. Now at $11 million, you wouldn't say that if he was signing with the Athletics or the Rays or another small-market club. But for a guy to make $11 million a year who had made 5 straight opening day starts from 2015 through 2019, this certainly seems like a guy who could come in and help elevate this rotation early on here. And the $11 million sent to Kluber, that is under the $16 million he had for his option down in Texas. That was declined earlier, but still a high enough number there for Kluber, a former 2-time Cy Young winner, to kind of jump at and obviously go to New York, where with these 2 signings, the Yankees certainly find themselves as the favorite in the American League East, in my opinion, with Blake Snell moving on down in Tampa and some other additional turnover they've had on the roster. I think this puts the Yankees in the driver's seat for the AL East moving forward to win that division. But the Yankees still have a few holes. Apparently, they are not done constructing their roster. But these 2 signings put them up relatively close against the luxury tax, because getting to that in a moment here, I want to run through the arbitration available players that the Yankees had, and they were able to come to agreements with each one of these guys. There were actually 8 names up for arbitration for the Yankees, and they agreed to terms with every one of them on a 1-year deal to avoid arbitration. The names there on that list were Aaron Judge. He signed a 1-year $10.175 million deal, up from around the $8.5 million that he was set to make in 2020. They also signed Gary Sanchez behind the dish. He was talked about possibly being moved on from in New York, but they offered him arbitration, and they came to an agreement at $6.35 million for the year. They also avoided arbitration with Luke Voigt at $4.7, Gio Urshela at $4.65, and then the last four here down at the bottom of the list, we have Gleyber Torres at $4 million. Reliever Chad Green signed for $2.15, and then they added Jordan Montgomery, $2.13, and then rounded out their all of their players at Clint Frazier with $2.1 million. So they agree to terms with all 8 of those gentlemen. Their salary is now set for 2021. You add in the $15 million average value for DJ LeMahieu, as well as the $11 million for Corey Kluber, and that brings you to a total, based on using resources online, of right about $203 to $205 million. You're getting figures anywhere in between there online, and the luxury tax starts at $210 million. So the Yankees have about $5 to $7 million worth left of wiggle room to stay under this luxury tax, which is a de facto salary cap, kind of self-implemented, because if you stay under the luxury tax, it resets your clock on the tax, and the more consecutive years you go over, the higher percentage you have to pay on every dollar, and they are a 2-time offender the last handful of years, so they would have to pay upwards of 30 and even 50 cents on the dollar when it comes to the luxury tax if they were unable to reset this market. So what does this mean for their remaining free agents? What does this mean for the rest of their roster construction moving forward? And the biggest name to note is Masahiro Tanaka. Tanaka, of course, was making around $20 million a year on average for his big league career here in the States, and that number would certainly put them over the 210 threshold. You also have Brett Gardner as an internal resource in the outfield. He's been a lifelong Yankee. They declined his option but still have interest in bringing him back to the Bronx, potentially at a much lesser cost. And there are a couple of other different ways that they could maneuver their salary to stay under the tax, such as making a trade for relief pitching. Adam Ottavio is due to make about $9 million on the last year of his deal. If they're able to move on from him to get them down to that 195 area, which gives them, again, $15 million to work with to add a few different pieces. But they still have needs in the Bronx to get to that level of the Dodgers, of the Padres, the White Sox, and that top-tier talent when it comes to World Series contenders. But, as of right now, it certainly looks like Tanaka will not be back in the Bronx. His salary requests are going to be too high to get them over the luxury tax, and Hal Steinbrenner has made it known that they are looking to save the money and stay under that tax. But the follow-up conversation, and this is an interesting one because nobody really knows how things are going to play out, but with the collective bargaining agreement between the players and Major League Baseball set to expire after the 2021 season, there have been rumors and there have been reports that players are not going to sign another agreement either with a luxury tax at all because the players hate how it is seen as a de facto salary cap, and in this particular case, keeping the Yankees from signing another big name to a big contract, which is costing players money in the long run, or they're going to, raise the salary tax level from 210 possibly to 250, 270. Again, those are all internal numbers that I'm throwing out. There haven't been any specific reports as to which level they're ultimately looking to have that number come in as. But because of this, a lot of local Yankees reporters are saying now is not the time to reset the salary tax because there's no guarantee that it is going to continue into 2022 and beyond. And with the likes of an organization such as the Yankees being able to essentially just print money whenever they want based on their television deal, revenue deals, and just overall being the empire that is the New York Yankees, a lot of their reporters are saying, hey, just go over at this level. You have the cash to be able to, pay these guys and pay the tax itself. There's no sense in resetting the tax when that may not even be a thing based on the new collective bargaining agreement. And, honestly, I do see both sides of this argument. I do like the fact that I don't believe there will be a luxury level tax or a salary cap. Those words are taboo in Major League Baseball, but that's essentially what the luxury tax is acting as. And the likes of the Yankees, who are getting close to that threshold, basically saying, hey, we're pausing and we're looking to add low-cost talent to stay below 210, is exactly what the players are looking to avoid in the next CBA agreement moving forward. But DJ LeMahieu returns to New York, 6 years, $90 million. Once again, this is not official yet, but those are the reports out there, as well as Corey Kluber. And I do like those two additions, making the Yankees the team to beat here now in the American League East, and certainly 1-1A with the Tampa Bay Rays coming off of their performance last year. But that'll do it here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll step aside now for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we'll discuss the other signings that have taken place across Major League Baseball. Things are picking up here ever so slightly as we're getting now under a month until teams are reporting to spring training. We've seen a bit more activity. So stick around, everybody. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll discuss all of these signings when we come back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Wherever you're listening to this, please do me a quick favor. Rate and review the podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora. You got Alexa now, Amazon doing podcasts. So wherever you're listening to this, there's a like button, there's 5 stars, rate and review. That goes a long way to helping us spread the love here within the GSMC Baseball Podcast. As well as, if you haven't checked out the other podcasts within the network, do yourself a favor. Head over to wherever you are, hit that little magnifying glass search icon, type in GSMC, and you'll come across about 20 to 25 different podcasts full of fantastic content for you guys out there. There's book review podcasts, movies, politics, news, or any other type of sport that you're into here. Hockey is back. Basketball's going at it. The NFL is currently in their divisional round weekend here. Patrick Mahomes left earlier this weekend with a concussion. Is he going to be able to get back for the AFC title game? And, what's taking place here? I guess I should say TBD because I'm recording at the end of that game, but it does look like Kansas City is, in fact, going to hold on, but I don't want to assume here, as I don't have the game on in the office. But last I checked, they were doing quite well, so they'll be facing off against Buffalo next week. And any other sport, college basketball is back, so check out GSMC wherever there's a search icon and podcasts available, and you guys will have a ton of great content to search through here moving forward. But diving back in here to a few other signings that have taken place since I talked to you guys last at the end of last week. Like I said, the hot stove is picking up just a little bit here. We still have the top names available out on the market, and we'll get to all the latest rumors, news, and notes around those guys coming up in segment number 3. But there were 4 more signings or reported signings that I want to discuss with you guys, and ultimately how this is going to shape Major League Baseball here in 2021. And the first one to discuss with you guys is the Astros signing relief pitcher Pedro Baez to a 2-year, $13.5 million deal. Now, there are still some details coming out here around the structure of the deal. It seems that he will get $4.5 million in 2021 and $5.5 million in 2022. But the deal includes innings pitched escalators that could increase it to $6.5 million for both years. And then there is a $7.5 million club option for 2023 with a $500,000 buyout. So Baez basically secures himself around $12-13 million guaranteed with the ability to make upwards of almost $20 million throughout the life of the contract. And Pedro Baez, he was with the LA Dodgers the last handful of years. He had been out there a number of years, and ultimately some Dodgers fans are none too pleased that he was willing to sign with the Astros because they are still upset around the sign-stealing scandal and the World Series that they believe the Astros stole from them back in 2017. So a few of the locals, a few of the beat writers out there are not very pleased with what's going on, but the Dodgers actually lost 2 individuals that we're going to talk about here over the course of the next 10 to 15 minutes. But Pedro Baez, his previous statistics look fantastic. He's only 32 years old, which certainly still seems that a 2, potentially 3-year deal is reasonable for Baez. But some of his underlying metrics are headed in the wrong direction. And this is something that Houston hopes that they'll be able to figure out, changing up some pitch usage, changing up some areas of attack, because the deal that Baez got, 2 for $13, was very similar to that the Mets gave Trevor May earlier this offseason, around $15 million. And when you look at their statistics from 2018 to 2020, they are very comparable, if not advantage Baez ever so slightly. But when it comes to predicting the future and looking at tendencies, this is where Trevor May certainly seems that his best baseball is ahead of him, and Baez is on the downward slide when it comes to potential issues moving forward. And none of them are more concerning than average four-seam velocity. Over the last handful of years, way back in 2015, he topped out at just under 98 miles an hour, but each of the last 5 seasons, this has ticked down very slightly until there was a major decline in 2020, where he went from 96 miles an hour to just over 94 and change. And now you can put this on the fact that he was recovering from a groin injury, so potentially that limited his velocity, the ability to use his lower half to get the velocity that he had in years past. He's also been throwing quite a few more changeups due to the dip in velocity. Those 2 pitches have given him success the past couple of years, but of course, four-seam velocity is, the top metric when it comes to trajectory, and the fact that it's declining here certainly isn't fantastic. And along with the velocity, it is the percentage of pitches thrown in the strike zone with that four-seam fastball. Once again, 2015, when he topped out of velocity, he was up at 55% in the strike zone. This dipped down all the way to about 37.5 for 2020. So his fastball velocity has dipped, and because of this, he hasn't been using it in the zone as often as he did in years past. But when you break down his heat maps that are out there, basically where in the strike zone by pitch location that he has been utilized, he does align with the Astros' theory in this thinking. Fastballs in all counts, he loves to work that top quadrant, if not just out of the strike zone at the top of the list. And when it comes to all pitches, they work down low. So he is one of those high fastballs, low changeup, low breaking balls. And this is something that we've seen from Houston, not only from Garrett Cole, but Justin Verlander, but even Ryan Presley out in the bullpen as well there in Houston. So bringing in Pedro Baez with the loss of Roberto Osuna certainly is trying to offset what's going on out there in the bullpen. But this certainly doesn't mean that Houston is done adding. There are a few names we'll discuss next segment that they could potentially be in on as well moving forward here. But the next signing to discuss was made by the Boston Red Sox. They brought back Martin Perez on a one-year deal worth $4.5 million. They do have a club option for 2022 at $6 million. That includes a $500,000 buyout. So essentially, Perez is guaranteed $5 million through the course of the deal. And this was certainly an interesting signing because the Red Sox declined his option at $6.25 back in November. So they bring him back at $1.25 less. And I guess if you're Boston, every penny counts. So $1 million saved here is where they can reinvest this elsewhere into the team moving forward. But Perez was the only pitcher to make all 12 of his starts for the Red Sox. He went 3-5 with a 4.50 ERA. He did take a shellacking at the end of the year, giving up a ton of runs there. So that ballooned his ERA just a bit because he actually allowed 2 earned runs or fewer in 7 of those 12 starts. So on the whole, Perez had a nice year for the Red Sox, and this is a nice signing to bring them back at a lower cost. And if he performs over the course of 162, similarly to where he did during those 7 starts in 2020, 1 year at 4.5 and then another year at $6 million is going to be a bargain for 2-11 when it comes to Perez. I mean, we talked about how the Yankees just signed Kluber for 1-11. They could be getting Perez here for 2 and 10.5 and potentially get a similar output there in Boston moving forward. So Chaim Bloom doesn't look to be done either. He's continuing to be involved in a ton of trade rumors, some lower-level value signings, and it'll be fascinating to see which direction ultimately Boston goes here throughout the next month by the time spring training rolls around in February. The third signing to discuss with you guys, the Philadelphia Phillies. My Phillies here locally in Philadelphia finally made a move of any sort of substance during the offseason. They added relief pitcher Archie Bradley on a 1-year, $6 million deal. And this is a fantastic signing locally for that price because Archie Bradley, he was traded this past offseason or during the regular season, from Arizona to Cincinnati. He was fantastic for Cincinnati and, over the course of the last handful of years, even dating back to 2017 when he was converted full-time to being a relief pitcher, he had a 2.95 ERA over 221 appearances. And the bullpen in Philadelphia was the historically worst bullpen in Major League history. I mean, they blew a handful of leads, an ERA over 7. So it's certainly been an issue for them moving forward and something that they are looking to build upon in 2021. And Bradley is fantastic in adding to this bullpen. So he will certainly be an 8th or 9th inning guy. He's got 136 career appearances in the 8th inning, 63 in the 9th inning. So he's had success in both roles. Like I said, converting 18 of 19 save opportunities back in 2019. So if they need a closer, he's a welcome addition to that bullpen as well. But in Philadelphia, that basically gives you Hector Neris, Jose Alvarado, who they added from the Rays, like we talked about, Sam Conrad. They added as well from the Giants. You have Connor Brogdon, Ranger Suarez, JoJo Romero. Really the only guys who have set their place in that bullpen, and then quite a few young arms battling for the remaining spots. But one nice little tidbit here on Bradley. Over the last 4 seasons, Bradley has struck out 9.9 per 9 innings, as well as has a 47% ground ball rate. And this is exactly what you want in a pitcher, either a strikeout or a ground ball, because obviously with launch angle, fly ball rates, the way the ball's jumping, whether it's juiced or not, we can certainly get into that if you guys want to, but he is the only reliever in the National League over that span, over the last 4 seasons, to hit both of those marks. And that's certainly something of value in Philadelphia where the ball flies a little bit. So to be able to miss bats late in the game and be able to work ground balls, double plays, is absolutely a welcome addition if you're a Phillies fan out there from what we had watched last summer, even over, just 60 games. I don't even know if I would have been able to handle 162 with that bullpen and all the leads that they were blowing late in games here. So the last signing we have reported here is the San Francisco Giants. They signed pitcher Alex Wood, formerly of the LA Dodgers. So the Dodgers losing two guys this past week, Alex Wood and Pedro Baez, but with their depth and their youth, they believe they'll be able to fill those holes. But of course, Alex Wood, he had a 1.93 career ERA in the World Series, pitching both in 2017 as well as this past October. So he came up big in the most crucial moments, and those are guys that you typically don't want to let walk if you're plan or attack is to get back to that level. But, Wood back in 2017, he had one of the best years for the Dodgers. He was 16-3 that year, only allowed 123 hits and 150 innings. And, of course, that was the year they lost to the Astros. But again, Wood was fantastic in that World Series, and he was really the only Dodgers pitcher to find extended success. He gave up one hit in Game 4, in which he started and went 5.2 innings. So he was fantastic once again. And then in Game 7, came out with two shutout hitless innings. So over 7 innings, only giving up one hit to a team that apparently knew what was coming. Goes to show how good his stuff is. And then this past year, he attributed to their success in L.A. once again, and he's going to be a loss for the Dodgers moving forward. So the left-handed pitcher for the Giants, a funky little delivery. The Giants looking to add depth to that rotation. They've had some turnover there, but they brought back Gausman on a qualifying offer. Johnny Cueto has a year or two left on his deal, so those three at the top of the list, as well as some fill-ins below them. I think the Giants, who finished right around 500 and almost made the playoffs last year, certainly think to themselves that they improved and got better while hurting another team within their division as well. So to recap here, the 4 signings: the Astros signed relief pitcher Pedro Baez to be an 8th or 9th inning guy for them. The Phillies signed pitcher Archie Bradley to be an 8th or 9th inning guy for them. And then the Red Sox brought back starting pitcher Martin Perez. And the Giants signed pitcher Alex Wood to add to their rotation moving forward. So none of the big names have signed just yet, and that's ultimately what we're going to discuss here in the next segment, following a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But there have been reports of deals, or offers, I should say, being floated out there to the likes of Real Muto, George Springer, the Blue Jays, the Mets. So we got some good stuff to discuss with you guys. So hang in there one more time. We're going to step aside once again here. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. When we come back, we're going to get you guys updated on all the rumors across Major League Baseball. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Again, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Happy Monday out there, everybody. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Hopefully you guys take a moment to reflect on everything that MLK Jr. did during his time, where we are now as a society, what he would want, and what his message was, and how that still permeates here, however many years later in 2021, as we continue to try to move forward as a society, continue to try to improve ourselves and get better one day at a time. So once again, if you're off work out there enjoying this podcast, I envy you, because I will be out there grinding and moving forward, but certainly thinking about MLK and everything that he did for us as a whole humanity and society moving forward. But welcome back once again. Hey, if you guys haven't done so yet, check us out on social media. Head to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of those different platforms, both the GSMC Baseball Podcast as well as the GSMC Podcast Network has pages out there where the Baseball Podcast will keep you guys up to date on everything Major League Baseball that's going on, from signings that have taken place to rumors that are out there. And then the Podcast Network will keep you up to date across all platforms with everything we have going on here in the network. So certainly do myself a favor, do yourself a favor, head to social media and check those out. But diving in here to segment number 3, we are discussing news, notes, rumors, updating you guys on the latest, everything going on with free agency, and no better place to start here than the top of the market and kind of what's taking place. But we'll start out with Trevor Bauer. The Blue Jays are viewed within the industry as pretty much the strongest contender to sign Bauer right now. And part of that is due to his recent vlogs and his quote-unquote criteria when it comes to picking a team that he shared on his YouTube channel. He spoke about how geography is not going to play a huge factor in where he plays, because there are some people concerned about the international travel with the coronavirus, with COVID, as well as, playing in New York or Toronto, kind of what home is going to be for this summer. But Bauer has made it known that first and foremost, a partnership is what he is looking for. And of course, Bauer, he's from LA. He went to UCLA. So he's been tied to the teams out there, such as the Angels, the Dodgers. The Dodgers, of course, would very much want to go short-term, high average annual value. But Bauer also has said that he is looking for a commitment, potentially long-term, if the numbers are right. And then the Mets kind of being on the outside looking in based on what the industry is saying and where they are looking to spend the rest of their money after adding Carlos Carrasco. They may be done on the starting pitching side of things. So it looks like the Angels and Blue Jays are the top 2 teams, with sources within the industry believing that the Blue Jays are the team to beat for Bauer services moving forward. Next up here, we have George Springer. It is said that the Blue Jays made an offer to DJ LeMahieu, and they were finalists to sign him before he went back to the Yankees. And unfortunately, it looks like the same thing may happen with George Springer, because it is basically said that it is down to the Blue Jays and the Mets. A source said as recently as this past Friday, Springer has expressed his preference to play near his home state of Connecticut. Therefore, the Mets get a slight geographical advantage in that particular case. Obviously, the Mets have been very active this offseason and are certainly still looking to add a bat into their lineup to take them even to that next level on top of Lindor and McCann. They added Carrasco in May, so it seems to be that their attention has turned to George Springer as opposed to Trevor Bauer as being that next big-time addition there in New York. So it is believed that Springer may make a move here in the next week or so. Once again, his teams are kind of finalizing offers, and he's comparing apples to apples here with Toronto and New York. So it looks like Toronto is the favorite for Bauer, which then in turn makes the Mets the favorite to land George Springer there in the outfield. JT Realmuto, he is next on the list here. It came out within the last 48 hours or so that the Phillies have made a 5-year, 9-figure deal or offer to JT Realmuto, slightly north of $100 million. Dave Dombrowski, this would be his first big move as GM and president of baseball operations for the Phillies. But this is well short of some rumored deals that Realmuto was looking for at the beginning of the offseason. Now, we heard, numbers all the way from 6 years, $180 million. I didn't think he would make it to that level, but I did think that $25 million a year could be obtainable for Real Muto, which would put him at 5-125. So the Phillies coming in right around 5 and then north of $100 million. We'll say 110 potentially at the top of the level. So $22 million a year. That would be just shy of the record for average value for a catcher that Mauer set way back when in Minnesota. So I do think that is a bit low for where Real Muto wanted, but the 5-year pact is something that he is going to take into consideration, because if I'm a Phillies fan, which I am, I'm looking at 4 years here is kind of that sweet spot. Real Muto wanting 6, we want 4, so they're meeting in the middle there with that 5-year offer. But if they're adding that 5th year, the average AAV is going to decline. So if you're looking at 4-105, now you're breaking that record. But if you're looking at 5-110, that certainly isn't to that level of where he was looking per year. But it does give him that extra year of service time, that extra year of commitment for a guy who will be in his mid to late 30s by the time this deal concludes itself. And, we haven't heard much rumblings when it comes to other teams being involved in the catching market. Things are drying up there a little bit when it comes to potential solutions. We heard the Yankees as a potential suitor if they whiffed on DJ LeMahieu. We heard a few other teams who could potentially be involved, but the only other one that I can throw out there is the LA Angels, with the Washington Nationals really being third on that list and kind of way back from where the Phillies would be able to give him that $100+ million. So I do think that Real Muto ends up back in Philadelphia. I do think they're going to have to fine-tune some of those numbers. I ultimately believe if they go 5 years, it'll probably come in right around the 115 mark, which would give him that $23 million a year that he's looking for. And if they can kind of come to that agreement, I do think it would be a nice deal for both sides, because spreading out the AAV allows the Phillies to continue to try to add pieces. As you look at their salary cap situation and the structure of their contract starting next year, money continues to fall off the books, and that $20 to $25 million per year doesn't look like as much of a burden in 2023 as it potentially does here in 2021. So Real Muto to the Phillies, Bauer to the Blue Jays, and Springer to the Mets is my predictions here as of recording late January 17th. Marcell Ozuna next on the list here. It's been said sources close to Ozuna have said that his market is solidifying over the weekend with both American League and National League teams involved. Of course, there is still uncertainty surrounding the designated hitter in the National League, but people do believe that that will be implemented, at least if not this year, certainly on the next CBA. It is one of those things that, will be a bargaining chip for the league and something that they're giving to the Players Association. But Ozuna, I don't know exactly where he's going to end up. The teams have not been released. The Braves would be involved, but apparently there are a handful of teams still in communication with Ozuna and potentially places for him to sign moving forward. Now we'll jump to the relief pitchers market here. Brad Hand is said to have 3 teams showing significant interest. Those are the Houston Astros, the Toronto Blue Jays, and the New York Mets. There were reports last week of a 2-year deal between the Mets and Hand, but those were said to be premature at the time, and that, yes, they were in conversation, but they were not close to an agreement. And of course, anybody could have had Brad Hand for 1 year and $10 million as he went through waivers in November, but every team passed on him, and I think is looking to spread out that $10 to $12 million over the course of 2 years moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see if the Astros ultimately make that jump to try to continue to add to that bullpen, or if the Blue Jays and Mets miss out on Springer or Bauer and turn their attention to the relief markets and improving the team that way. Kirby Yates is considering offers from 5 different teams. However, one of these teams is not the San Diego Padres, so he will not be returning to his previous club. The Blue Jays are rumored to be within that amongst of teams, like I mentioned, being involved here with pretty much every big-time guy out on the market, every relief pitcher also in conversation. So Brad Hand and Kirby Yates both seem to have interest from the Blue Jays, and it's a matter of cost and really which direction they would look to go here moving forward. Next on the list, we have Masahiro Tanaka. I talked to you guys about how he'd made an average of $20 million per year during his stay in Major League Baseball. Well, the reports are coming out now after these signings. He's looking for a one-year contract between $15 and $20 million. The report also states that he could return to Japan if he's not able to land this type of deal that he is currently looking for. He's been solid as of late, two-time All-Star during his career here at MLB. He appeared in 10 games during the 2020 campaign, 3.56 ERA, 44 strikeouts in 48 innings, and this was an improvement from his 2019, where he had a 4.45 ERA. So a one-year deal certainly seems to be low risk, high reward. You know, the Phillies, I wouldn't be opposed to adding something like this. There were talks about the Padres being involved, the Mets being involved again. But really, there isn't any favorite in the clubhouse for Tanaka. But now that he has kind of set his market, I do believe we'll see more and more teams start to try to get involved and potentially signing Tanaka moving forward. A few other guys out there. Jake Odorizzi is said to have interest across the board. The Phillies have been rumored out there. The Blue Jays, the Mets, quite a few other teams. The Twins potentially considering bringing him back after he pitched for them for a number of years out there. The Red Sox could potentially be an option. The San Francisco Giants have been linked to his market moving forward. So everything is continuing to be fluid, but Odorizzi seems to be that second tier of starting pitcher that does have a market and will certainly find himself with a job here coming up in 2021. The Padres, they're still talking to Trevor Rosenthal. It's reported out there that they may stand pat, but they're certainly looking to continue the relationship with Rosenthal, even though they are not in on Yates. They did like what Rosenthal did in 2020 with a 1.90 ERA and almost a 42% K rate in just over 23 innings with the Royals and the Padres in 2020. So Rosenthal and the Padres continuing to have conversations and potentially bringing him back for another run at things here in 2021. Who else do we have here? Didi Gregorius. Once again, his market continues to point itself back to Philadelphia. That's the trend that's going on. It seems to be that Didi was looking for that 2 to 3 year deal, but not a lot of teams out there are expressing interest in that type of commitment. And the Phillies currently looking for that stopgap at the shortstop position until one of their recent draft picks, Bryson Stott, is able to prove that he is ready for Major League time. And that's where Didi potentially on 1 year, $10, $15 million. I think this would be a nice signing for them to bring him back and ultimately, continue to improve the ball club. Because early on, it did seem that Real Muto and Didi were both going to leave Philadelphia. But as we continue to get closer and closer to February, it seems like those guys could be back in the red pinstripes for 2021. And lastly here, the latest rumor we had revolves around starting pitching and Luis Castillo of the Cincinnati Reds. Of course, the Reds not bringing back Bauer. They've also made a couple additional moves as well within the starting rotation, looking to cut costs and, improve the ball club for future teams. And Castillo, who is fantastic and has one of the best whiff rates on his changeup, fastball, ground ball rates. If you're looking at one of the graphs I have here, whiff percentage as well as ground ball percentage, Steven Strasburg, for just reference here, had a 31% whiff percentage. Well, Luis Castillo is at 35%. And then Strasburg had a 51% ground ball percentage. And Luis Castillo, once again, coming in at 57%. So he is in that upper right-hand quadrant when it comes to exactly what you're looking for from a starting pitcher. So where could he end up? There's rumors around the New York Yankees. Now, these may not be as loud after they signed Corey Kluber, but they were certainly involved with Cincinnati and having that conversation. There could be the Atlanta Braves. Of course, they like Ian Anderson, Kyle Wright, Mike Soroka. They signed Morton, but, depending on the price, they could be in for Castillo. You have the Toronto Blue Jays, who, of course, like I said, have been in on pretty much everybody, but have yet to actually find that top-of-the-line front-end starter. And if they miss on Bauer, Castillo could be a fantastic runner-up for them. And then the last couple of teams we have here are the Minnesota Twins and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Both of these teams, the Diamondbacks going through a bit of a retool, rebuild, trying to compete with the likes of the Padres and the Dodgers, and then the Twins, who now have to put up with the White Sox and all the moves that they have made, even though Minnesota has been a really good ball club themselves. They're looking to Chicago and thinking to themselves they may have to upgrade as well here moving forward. So that's the latest across the board. Again, hopefully we'll have some concrete information to talk about here over the next coming weeks when it comes to signings and who's going where for how much money, but a lot going on out there on the hot stove as things are beginning to warm just a little bit. But we'll step aside one last time here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we'll discuss the international signing period, kind of let you guys know what's going on there. It's a bit of a crazy time, but we'll keep you guys updated on everything that's happening. So stick around, everybody. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks again for listening, everybody. If you guys enjoyed today's episode thus far, be a friend and tell a friend. Share us with one of your buddies, whether it's a group text or a family friend. If you guys know somebody out there who's a Major League Baseball fan, international baseball fan, as you guys like to know, I was talking KBO, Professional Japanese League, Korean League, anything that was happening during the pandemic to discuss baseball with you guys. We were talking about it. So be a friend, tell a friend, help us continue to grow, share, like, rate, review. I very much appreciate it, everybody. But here we are, fourth and final segment, wrapping up today's show. And what we're going to be talking about here is recently the International Prospect Pool was opened back up for Major League Baseball. And normally this takes place in the middle of the summer. July 2nd is typically when the international signing period starts for Major League Baseball. But of course, due to the pandemic and everything going on, Major League Baseball pushed it back up until January 15th. So if you're listening to this now here on the 18th on Monday, on Friday the signing period opened, and quite a few international prospects were signed this offseason. Now, what's the difference between the draft and the international prospects out there? Well, the Major League Baseball draft covers all players born from the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. All other countries out there, such as the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Venezuela, Panama, other Latin American countries, they all fall into the international free agency category. And of course, there are a ton of guys who are, superstars now at the Major League Baseball level who have come from this period and from this signing. I mean, the likes of Ronald Acuna Jr., Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis Jr., Eloy Jimenez, and then we have emerging prospects like Wander Franco, Christian Pache, Julio Rodriguez, Marco Luisiano, Novelli Marte. All of these guys have come from the international signing markets and are all big-time players at the major league level. So, this day, even though it kind of gets, swept under the rug and buried a little bit when it comes to importance of Major League Baseball, they've certainly shown that recently these guys can be huge difference makers for teams out there. And, I'm going to run through here kind of the top 10 or 20 names and where they were signed for how much money. I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on any of these guys because, of course, there isn't a ton of film on them or, they didn't play at the collegiate level here in the States. So, I didn't exactly follow who were the top guys, but I was able to use some resources online, find some names here, and ultimately where they ended up moving forward. But the biggest name on the list, and the last name is going to be familiar to you out there, is Yoelkis Cespedes. He is Yoenis Cespedes' younger half-brother and the number one international prospect this year, according to Major League Baseball. He's already 23 years old, so quite developed and could be on the fast track to Major League Baseball. But he actually signed with the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox gave him a $2.05 million deal. He is being considered a potential 5-tool player in the big leagues. And as recently as 3 years ago in the 2017 WBC, or World Baseball Classic for Cuba, as a 20-year-old, he went 4 for 16 with a double in 5 games. So was a bit overmatched as a 20-year-old going up against the best of the best, but according to reports in recent times, he has revamped his swing and, quote, now looks almost exactly like his older brother in the batter's box, end quote. Apparently he's added some power, some explosive bat speed, and certainly finds himself the top guy going to Chicago, and Chicago's had success in this market in the past. I mean, Tatis, a few other guys going through Chicago, they seem to get who they want here moving forward. But the number 2 prospect, Oscar Colas, he has not signed yet. And once again, this isn't like a 48-hour window for these guys to sign. This international signing period actually runs all the way through the date of December 15th, 2021. So you can sign anybody from now all the way through December. A lot of guys jump at it to get to the States here this summer to start their professional career. But Coales did not sign just yet, but he is a left-hander who can play all 3 outfield positions from Cuba, as well as Cespedes is from Cuba as well. Next up here, we have Wilman Diaz, a shortstop from Venezuela. He signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers for $2.6, or just under $2.7, $2.695, pretty much is where it came in for Diaz. So the Dodgers picked him up. Diaz shows a plus hitting tool. He's got excellent bat speed, great pitch recognition, as well as a plus arm and defensive range at the shortstop position as well. So the Dodgers signed an international shortstop there. Carlos Colmenares, a shortstop from Venezuela as well, he signed for $3 million with the Tampa Bay Rays. He is a 17-year-old shortstop. He's got good bat speed, the ability to drive the ball to all fields in games, and is known as an above-average defender. And the Tampa Bay Rays certainly like these kinds of additions to continue to use value and get return on investment. Number 5, here we have Armando Cruz, a shortstop from the Dominican Republic. He signed with the Washington Nationals for $3.9 million. He is only 16 years old. He's a plus defender with an extraordinary combination of footwork and hands. He's shown good bat speed, but he has a slight uppercut, and offensively, that's where his game is lagging behind the defense. But as a 16-year-old, the Nationals certainly see enough to give the guy just about a $4 million deal to sign there in Washington. Number 6 is Christian Hernandez, another shortstop from the Dominican Republic. He signed with the Chicago Cubs for $3 million. People consider him a potential 5-tool shortstop. He's only 17 years old, so another young guy who will continue to develop and grow, and we probably won't see him at the big league level for a number of years here moving forward. Number 7 on the list was Pedro Leon, an outfielder from Cuba. He signed with the Houston Astros for $4 million. That's a big-time deal for Leon, and just based on kind of a quick run-through here, it does look like the largest signing bonus handed out by anybody this year. He projects as an everyday center fielder and a rapid mover to the big leagues, according to the Astros senior scouting director, Charlie Gonzalez. He's got a compact build, tremendous strength, and is an extremely quick-twitch athlete. He is a 22-year-old, played 2 seasons in Cuba's professional league. He hit .359 with 21 home runs in only 65 games. So certainly showing that he has the power to continue to improve. And Houston looking for a new outfield, essentially, with losing all 3 starting outfielders this offseason, potentially signing some stopgaps. They think Leon could come in and help them. Probably not this summer, but moving forward here, certainly. Number 8 on the list is Jesus Gales. He is a catcher from Venezuela. He signed with the Dodgers for $812,000. 17-year-old, had been linked to the Yankees, but the Dodgers were able to come in and sign him away from New York. He's got quick feet, a strong arm, known for a high baseball IQ. It's just the offensive side of things that L.A. will wait to continue to come around here moving forward. Number 9 on the list, we have Ricardo Perez, a catcher from Venezuela. He signed with the Philadelphia Phillies for $1 million. He is a 17-year-old as well. He has impressive footwork. He makes consistent hard contact and shows average arm strength and accuracy. But both of those tools are continuing and projected to improve as he matures and continues to grow. And the Phillies have had success in the international market with the signing of Carlos Ruiz for only $8,000. So the catching position internationally has been one of success for Philadelphia, and they're going back to the well there with Ricardo Perez. Number 10 here, we have Yiddy Capay, shortstop from Cuba. He signed for $3.5 million with the Marlins. Relatively large deal there for the 10th-ranked prospect. He is an 18-year-old, and he has drawn comparisons to a young Carlos Correa, according to Major League Baseball Pipeline. He considers himself an aggressive player, thinks he has a good bat, uses all the field, good defense, aggressive base running, and is known to make hard contact moving forward. So the Marlins got on the board there and join the party internationally. As we continue to run down the list here, we'll pick up the pace ever so slightly, giving you guys another 10 or 15 names or so. Number 11 is Shalin Polanco, an outfielder for the Dominican Republic. He went to the Pirates for $2.3 million. We have Daniel Vasquez, a shortstop from the DR, going to the Royals at 1.5. Pedro Pineda, an outfielder out of the DR, to the Athletics at $2.5 million. Christian Santana, a shortstop from the DR, to the Tigers at just under $3 million. So Santana does well for himself, ranked as the 14th best prospect, but getting almost $3 million. So the Tigers certainly see some benefit and some upside there. We have Norge Vera, a right-handed pitcher from Cuba, signed by the White Sox. Danny De Hernande, a shortstop from Venezuela, to the Twins at $2.2 million. And then we have Yanni Piran, an outfielder from the Dominican Republic, to Tampa. Jackson Chirino, a shortstop, to the Brewers from Venezuela. Victor Acosta, a shortstop from the DR, to the Padres. And Miguel Blais, an outfielder from the Dominican Republic, to the Red Sox moving forward. So those are just kind of the top 20 or so guys. You can certainly do a bit more research into the teams moving forward. Now, of course, they only have a certain amount of money from their international pool. You can trade bonus pool money. You can, look at potentially, how many guys you want to sign for that amount of money. There are a number of teams who made a lot of lower-level deals. So you definitely want to Google out there whichever organization you're rooting for to take a look at ultimately who they signed, because I know I only mentioned a bunch of teams one time and the White Sox twice, but even looking at it, if you're a Mets fan, I didn't read your name once, and they signed 6 names here, with the biggest contract being $500,000. So a lot of teams out there made moves. The Cardinals signed 5 guys. The Orioles, they were very active, adding 7 guys so far. Only one guy hit the $1 million mark. Everybody else right around $300,000 to $400,000. The Phillies made 4 moves. The Reds made 5 moves. So there are names on the list that I didn't talk about that your team has added and will continue to add once again, because this window doesn't end here for another 12 months. It's just kind of similar to NFL free agency, unlike MLB free agency, which we've talked about. But a lot of the flurry of moves come early on in the process for the high-level talent, and then teams kind of see where their budget is, how much they have left, and ultimately fill in the rest of their roster and their pool moving that way. But it'll be fascinating to see where these guys are assigned when it comes to the minor leagues. You guys are aware out there, we've discussed how the minors cut a number of different teams and will now have 4 teams under them instead of the 6 or 7. Or whether or not these guys will be sent to develop at their spring training facilities. I would presume a lot of the 16, 17-year-olds, that would be the case. But guys like Cespedes and 22, 23-year-olds may kind of jump right into that AA, maybe even AAA level and be on the fast track to the major leagues. But that'll do it for today's episode, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I know I myself had a lot of fun talking about it with you guys. Just to recap today's episode here one more time. In the first segment, once again, DJ LeMahieu re-signs with the New York Yankees at 6 years, $90 million. The Yankees also add Corey Kluber to 1 year, $11 million. They avoided arbitration with all 8 of their available players, which puts them about $5 to $7 million under the luxury tax, and it'll be interesting to kind of follow along to see what type of maneuvers they make and whether or not they cross that threshold. Then we talked about the signings of Pedro Baez to the Astros, Martin Perez to the Red Sox, Archie Bradley to the Phillies, and Alex Wood to the Giants. And then here in segments 3 and 4, we had a lot of fun talking about the rumors, news, notes, and international free agent signing period. So one last time before I sign off here, I'll ask you guys, please rate and review the podcast. Leave a comment. If you guys write a comment, I'll check them out here. I'll read them on the show. If you guys have a question or a discussion, I'll certainly share your opinion and we can have a conversation, as well as check us out on social media. That will continue to help us grow and expand here within the podcast network. But that'll do it for today's episode. Once again, I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Very much appreciate you guys listening out there. Hopefully you have a fantastic holiday today. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. You guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll talk to you once again this Thursday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.